The testing chamber hummed with energy that made the air itself taste metallic. Commander Sarah Chen stood among the assembled candidates, her plain military uniform stark against the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other applicants. The Galactic Academy of Strategic Excellence had drawn beings from across known space, each representing their species' finest military minds. To her left, Prince Zephyron of the Celestial Throne adjusted his jeweled crown for the dozenth time. His blue-scaled skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that supposedly indicated superior intellect among his people. The patterns currently displayed his anxiety, though he seemed unaware of the tell. Behind him stood General Vorthak, whose cybernetic implants covered half his skull in gleaming chrome. The Mechanoid Empire had sent their most decorated commander, a being who had never known defeat in over 3 centuries of warfare. His red optical sensors swept the room continuously, cataloging threats and weaknesses. Near the chamber's center, Lady Seraphina maintained perfect posture despite the gravity being set to accommodate heavier world species. Her crystalline exoskeleton caught and refracted the testing chamber's lights into rainbow patterns. The Prism Collective considered her their greatest tactical genius, capable of processing 17 different battle scenarios simultaneously. Admiral Kresh represented the Hive Confederation, his insectoid form towering over most other candidates. Pheromone glands along his thorax released confidence markers, though Sarah's enhanced human nose detected underlying stress chemicals. The Admiral's compound eyes never stopped moving, a trait that had served him well in the swarm tactics that made his people so feared. Sarah counted 43 candidates total, each handpicked by their respective civilizations. She was the only human present, and many of the others had already dismissed her as insignificant. Her species was relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Most of these beings commanded fleets that predated human spaceflight by millennia. The chamber's walls suddenly shifted, revealing the Academy's faculty. At their head stood Director Mylara, known throughout the galaxy as the Dragon Lady. Her reptilian features bore the scars of countless battles, and her eyes held the weight of decisions that had shaped interstellar politics for over 800 years. She had never been defeated in combat, never lost a strategic engagement, and never shown mercy to those who proved unworthy of her instruction. "Welcome, candidates." Director Mylara's voice carried easily through the chamber without amplification. "You represent the finest military minds your species have produced. You come here seeking admission to the Academy, believing yourselves worthy of learning the deepest secrets of warfare and strategy." Her gaze swept across the assembled beings, pausing momentarily on each face. When those ancient eyes met Sarah's, the human felt as though her soul was being weighed and measured. The director's expression remained unreadable. "The Academy has stood for 10,000 years, Mylara continued. "In that time, we have graduated fewer than 200 students. Most who seek admission fail before they even understand what is required of them. Today, you will face the ultimate test." Prince Zephyron shifted nervously, his bioluminescent patterns flickering. "Director Mylara, might I inquire about the nature of this test?" My royal advisors prepared extensive briefings, but the Academy's methods remain mysterious. The Dragon Lady's lips curved in what might have been amusement. "The ultimate test cannot be prepared for, Your Highness. It reveals who you truly are, beneath all pretense and training. Some of you may surprise yourselves. Most will not." General Vorthak's cybernetic implants whirred softly as he processed this information. "Director, my combat algorithms have analyzed over 50 million tactical scenarios. Surely the test draws from established military doctrine, does it?" Mylara asked, her tone suggesting the question was more profound than it appeared. "Tell me, General, how many of your 50 million scenarios involved admitting failure?" The mechanoid's optical sensors flickered in what Sarah recognized as confusion. In his cybernetic culture, failure was simply deleted and overwritten. The concept of deliberately acknowledging it seemed foreign to his programming. Lady Seraphina's crystalline form chimed softly as she spoke. "Director, the Prism Collective has achieved perfect efficiency through systematic analysis. We have reduced warfare to mathematical certainty. Surely this test can be similarly quantified. Can it? Mylara's response carried the same enigmatic quality. When mathematics meet chaos, which proves stronger? Sarah listened to these exchanges with growing understanding. The other candidates were approaching this like any other military evaluation, trying to determine the parameters and optimal responses. But the director's questions suggested something deeper was at stake. Admiral Kresh's pheromone glands released complex chemical signals as he spoke. The Hive Confederation has never encountered a strategic problem that could not be solved through superior numbers and coordination. Our test scores in simulation warfare remain unmatched. Simulations. Mylara repeated the word, as though it tasted bitter. How many of you have commanded forces in actual combat? Not simulations, not war games, but real warfare, where your decisions determine who lives and who dies? Several hands rose, including Prince Zephyron's jeweled gauntlet and General Vorthak's cybernetic appendage. Lady Seraphina's crystalline form glowed brighter to indicate affirmation. Admiral Kresh released confident pheromones. Sarah raised her hand as well, remembering the colony ship that had gone dark in the Kepler sector. She had been just a lieutenant then, thrust into command when the rescue mission went wrong. The decisions she made in those desperate hours still haunted her dreams. Good, Mylara nodded approvingly. Real experience provides context that no simulation can replicate. But experience alone does not guarantee wisdom. How many of you have ever ordered a retreat? Fewer hands remained raised. Prince Zephyron lowered his immediately, as royal doctrine forbade acknowledging tactical withdrawal. General Vorthak's programming contained no retreat protocols, so his hand dropped as well. Lady Seraphina's glow dimmed as she considered whether strategic repositioning qualified as retreat. Admiral Kresh maintained his raised hand, though his pheromone signature showed uncertainty. In hive warfare, tactical withdrawal was sometimes necessary to preserve the greater swarm. Sarah kept her hand raised, remembering the bitter taste of ordering her ships to fall back while colonists died below. Sometimes retreat was the only way to save anything at all. Interesting, Mylara observed. How many have ever surrendered to save lives? Now only Sarah's hand remained raised. The other candidates stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to contempt. In their cultures, surrender was the ultimate failure, a concept so foreign that some of their languages lacked words for it. Director Mylara's ancient eyes fixed on Sarah again, and this time the human saw something that might have been respect. Commander Chen, would you share the circumstances of your surrender? Sarah's throat felt dry as she recalled that dark day. Pirates had taken a civilian transport hostage. They were executing passengers every hour to force our withdrawal. Our weapons could have destroyed their ship, but 200 innocents would have died with them. I surrendered my squadron to buy time for negotiation. And the outcome? Mylara prompted. 47 crew members died in pirate custody before we could mount a rescue, Sarah admitted. But 153 civilians lived because we chose restraint over pride. Prince Zephyron's bioluminescent patterns showed disgust. You sacrificed military assets for mere civilians? The royal fleet exists to project power, not coddle the weak. General Vorthak's optical sensors focused on Sarah with renewed interest. Your tactical algorithm prioritized civilian preservation over military efficiency. This introduces unacceptable variables into combat calculations. Lady Seraphina's crystalline form chimed disapprovingly. The Prism Collective teaches that emotional decision-making leads to suboptimal outcomes. Logic should have dictated immediate assault to minimize long-term casualties. Admiral Kresh released pheromones indicating strategic confusion. The hive protects its own through strength. Surrender signals weakness that invites further predation. Sarah met their criticism without flinching. Sometimes the hardest choice is admitting you can't save everyone. But trying to save some is better than saving none through pride. Director Mylara raised a scaled hand for silence. Fascinating perspectives. Each of you represents different approaches to command, different philosophies of power. The ultimate test will reveal which philosophy serves best when everything you believe is challenged. The chamber's walls began to shift again, revealing corridors that led deeper into the academy. Strange energies danced along the passages, and Sarah could hear distant sounds that might have been machinery or something far more alien. "The test begins now," Mylara announced. "You will proceed alone into the Academy's inner chambers. There you will encounter scenarios designed to challenge every assumption you hold about warfare, leadership, and power itself. Some of you will emerge changed. Others will not emerge at all." Prince Zephyron's patterns flickered with alarm. "Director, surely you don't mean actual danger? I am heir to a throne that rules over 7 star systems. Your royal blood offers no protection here," Mylara replied coldly. "The Academy recognizes only one nobility. The nobility of wisdom earned through trial. Your titles and birthright count for nothing in the depths below." General Vorthak's cybernetic implants sparked as he processed this information. "My survival protocols require clarification of threat parameters. What exactly awaits us?" Quote, "Truth," the Dragon Lady answered simply. "The one enemy that no armor can deflect, no algorithm can overcome, no amount of firepower can defeat. You will face the truth of who you really are, stripped of all pretense and comfortable lies." Lady Seraphina's crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies as she analyzed this statement. "Truth is subjective, Director. The Prism Collective has proven that reality can be mathematically optimized to support any desired outcome. Has it?" Mylara's smile showed far too many teeth. "Then your test should prove simple. After all, if truth bends to mathematics, what could possibly challenge you?" Admiral Kresh's compound eyes fixed on the shadowy corridors ahead. His pheromone glands released complex mixtures as he tried to process scent markers from the passages. Whatever lay beyond confused his biological sensors, presenting chemical signatures that seemed to shift and change even as he analyzed them. "The test is individual," Mylara continued. "You may encounter other candidates, but their experiences will be uniquely their own. What terrifies one may empower another. What breaks one may forge another stronger. The Academy cares nothing for your species, your rank, or your previous achievements. It sees only what you might become." Sarah studied the available passages, noting that each seemed to call to different candidates. Prince Zephyron was drawn toward a corridor lined with mirrors that reflected not his current appearance, but various versions of himself in different regalia. General Vorthak's sensors pulled him toward a passage humming with electronic harmonies. Lady Seraphina's crystalline form resonated most strongly with a tunnel that refracted light into impossible geometric patterns. The passage that called to Sarah appeared completely ordinary, just gray walls and simple lighting. No grandeur, no advanced technology, no mysterious energies. Just a plain corridor that seemed to lead into darkness. Somehow, that simplicity felt more ominous than all the exotic phenomena drawing her fellow candidates. "Remember," Director Mylara said as the candidates began to separate toward their chosen paths. "The Academy has graduated fewer than 200 students in 10,000 years. Most who enter these passages emerge broken, their confidence shattered, their certainties destroyed. They return to their homeworlds as cautionary tales about the price of ambition." Prince Zephyron paused at the threshold of his mirror-lined corridor. "And what of those who graduate? What do they become?" The Dragon Lady's ancient eyes gleamed with something that might have been pride or sorrow. "They become what the galaxy needs them to be. They learn that true power comes not from commanding others, but from commanding themselves. They discover that victory sometimes wears the face of defeat, and that the greatest enemies are often found within." As the candidates disappeared into their respective passages, Sarah took a final look at Director Mylara. The ancient being watched them go with an expression of infinite patience, as though she had witnessed this scene countless times before. How many brilliant minds had she watched enter these corridors? How many had never returned? Sarah stepped into her plain corridor, leaving the testing chamber's light behind. The passage stretched ahead into darkness, and with each step, she felt the weight of her own assumptions and certainties pressing down upon her. Whatever lay ahead would test not her tactical knowledge or strategic training, but something far more fundamental. Behind her, the chamber's lights dimmed, as Director Mylara settled in to wait. Some tests took hours. Others took days. A few had lasted years. The Academy measured time differently than the outside galaxy, focused not on efficiency but on truth. However long it took for each candidate to face themselves completely, that was how long the test would last. The ultimate test had begun. Sarah's corridor stretched endlessly ahead, the plain gray walls offering no clues about what awaited her. Her footsteps echoed strangely, as though the sound was being absorbed and reflected by surfaces that weren't quite there. The air grew thicker as she progressed, carrying scents that reminded her of hospital corridors and burning metal. After what felt like hours of walking, the passage opened into a vast chamber. Sarah stepped inside and immediately recognized the bridge of the CNS Defiance, the colony ship she had served on 8 years ago. Every detail was perfect, from the coffee stain on the navigation console to the family photos taped beside the communication station. "This isn't possible," she whispered. But her voice carried the authority of someone who had learned to trust impossible things. The bridge crew turned to look at her, and Sarah's heart clenched as she recognized faces that had been dead for years. Lieutenant Rodriguez smiled from the tactical station, his uniform still bearing the scorch marks from the explosion that had killed him. Ensign Park waved cheerfully from communications, the gaping wound in her throat somehow not interfering with her bright expression. "Commander Chen," Rodriguez called out happily. "We've been waiting for you. The situation is developing exactly as you remember." The main screen flickered to life, showing the hijacked civilian transport, Prosperity drifting dead in space. Sarah knew what came next, had relived it in nightmares for years. The pirates would begin executing hostages in 17 minutes. Her squadron's weapons could destroy the transport, but 200 innocent civilians would die with their captors. "Orders, Commander?" Rodriguez asked, his dead eyes bright with expectation. Sarah approached the command chair slowly, memories flooding back. This was the moment that had defined her career, the decision that had earned her both commendation and condemnation. She had chosen surrender over slaughter, negotiation over immediate action. 47 of her crew had died in pirate custody, but 153 civilians had lived. "I know how this ends," she said quietly. "I made my choice 8 years ago. Did you?" The voice came from behind her, and Sarah spun to see Director Mylara standing near the turbolift doors. The Dragon Lady looked exactly as she had in the testing chamber, but her presence here felt different, more fundamental somehow. "This is my memory," Sarah protested. "The Kepler sector incident. I was there. Were you?" Mylara asked, settling into the observer's chair that definitely hadn't been there moments before. "Or were you somewhere else entirely, making entirely different choices?" The main screen shifted, showing not the hijacked transport but a different scene entirely. Sarah saw herself standing on the bridge of a massive dreadnought, its weapons trained on a defenseless planet below. The uniform she wore bore the insignia of an admiral, and her expression held the cold calculation of someone who had never learned mercy. "What is this?" Sarah demanded, but part of her already knew. "Another path," Mylara replied calmly. "Another choice. In this timeline, you never surrendered to pirates. You learned that mercy was weakness, that decisive action trumped moral qualms. You became the most feared admiral in human space." The scene played out before them. This other Sarah ordered the bombardment of population centers, viewing civilian casualties as acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. Her campaigns were swift, brutal, and completely effective. No enemy dared oppose her twice. "I would never," Sarah began, but Mylara raised a scaled hand for silence. "Wouldn't you? Look closer at your other self. See what shaped her." The display shifted again, showing the same colony ship scenario that had haunted Sarah's real memories. But here, the young lieutenant made a different choice. When the pirates began executing hostages, this Sarah ordered an immediate assault. The transport was destroyed along with all aboard, but the pirates never had a chance to establish their pattern of terror. One decisive action. The other, Sarah explained to her assembled officers, her voice cold with certainty. 200 dead today prevents 2,000 dead tomorrow. We cannot allow criminals to believe that hostages provide protection. Sarah watched in horror as her alternate self built a career on such ruthless calculations. Each decision led to greater authority, higher rank, more power to impose her will. The other Sarah never second-guessed herself, never lost sleep over casualties, never allowed emotion to cloud tactical judgment. She's everything you could have been, Mylara observed. Efficient, successful, feared throughout the galaxy. Her enemies surrender before she even arrives, because they know she grants no quarter, accepts no compromise. She's a monster, Sarah whispered. Is she? Her methods ended 3 separate wars years ahead of schedule. Her reputation prevented countless conflicts from ever beginning. The galaxy is more peaceful because of her ruthless efficiency. Sarah stared at the display, watching her other self accept another commendation for decisive leadership. The Admiral Sarah wore her authority like armor, never showing doubt or hesitation. Her subordinates followed orders without question because they knew she would never ask them to do anything she wouldn't do herself. Peace through fear, Sarah said quietly. Order through intimidation. The Roman model, Mylara agreed. Make desert and call it peace. Your other self discovered that mercy is often the most expensive luxury a leader can afford. The scene shifted again, showing a conference room where Admiral Sarah negotiated a treaty. Her counterparts agreed to every human demand, because the alternative was facing her in battle. Her reputation had grown to the point where her mere presence at negotiations was tantamount to military victory. Look at what she accomplished, Mylara continued. 3 sectors brought to heel. 7 pirate fleets eliminated. An entire rebel movement crushed before it could spread. She saved more lives through intimidation than most admirals saved through protection. Sarah felt sick watching herself become everything she despised. But she couldn't deny the results. The other Sarah's universe was more stable, more prosperous, safer for innocent civilians. The price was paid in the blood of those who dared oppose human expansion. But the ledger showed a profit. Why are you showing me this? Sarah asked. Because you need to understand the weight of the choices you make, Mylara replied. Every act of mercy enables future cruelty. Every moment of hesitation costs lives. The path you took, the surrender you chose, it had consequences beyond the immediate situation. The display changed once more, showing the aftermath of Sarah's actual decision in the Kepler sector. The pirates had been emboldened by her surrender, believing that human commanders could be manipulated through hostage-taking. They struck again 6 months later, and again after that. The pattern of mercy that Sarah established cost hundreds of lives over the following years. Your kindness taught them that humans were weak, Mylara said pitilessly. Your compassion became their weapon. How many died because you chose to negotiate instead of acting? Sarah watched the cascade of consequences play out. Each pirate attack grew bolder, each hostage situation more elaborate. Other human commanders faced impossible choices because the precedent of surrender had been established. Some followed Sarah's example and paid the price. Others chose the harder path and lived with the immediate costs. I couldn't have known, Sarah protested weakly. Could you? You're trained in strategic thinking, Commander. Did you truly believe that showing weakness would discourage future aggression? Or did you choose the path that let you sleep better at night, regardless of the long-term consequences? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Sarah had always told herself that saving those civilians was worth the cost, but she had never truly calculated what that cost might be. How many officers had died because pirates expected human commanders to be reasonable? How many innocent people had suffered because criminals learned to use mercy as a weapon? The Academy exists to forge leaders who understand such complexities, Mylara continued. Your fellow candidates each represent different approaches to power, but they all share one fundamental flaw. They believe in simple solutions. The display showed Prince Zephyron facing his own trial. He stood before a mirror that reflected not his royal regalia, but a peasant's rags. The reflection spoke in a voice filled with hunger and desperation, listing every luxury the prince enjoyed while his subjects starved. Each jewel in his crown represented a family that could have been fed, every thread of silk, a child who died without medicine. The prince believes in nobility through bloodline, Mylara observed. He's learning that true authority must be earned through sacrifice, not inherited through accident of birth. Another display revealed General Vorthak connected to a vast network of cybernetic implants. But instead of enhancing his capabilities, the technology was showing him the human cost of his mechanical perfection. Every augmentation required rare minerals mined by slave labor. His enhanced reflexes came at the cost of empathy circuits that had been removed to make room for tactical processors. The general believes in perfectibility through technology, Mylara said. He's discovering that some human qualities cannot be improved without being lost entirely. Lady Seraphina appeared on a third screen, her crystalline form fracturing as she tried to process scenarios that defied mathematical analysis. She stood in a refugee camp where suffering couldn't be quantified, where hope and despair existed simultaneously, where the optimal solution changed based on unmeasurable variables like love, faith, and simple human stubbornness. The lady believes in certainty through calculation, Mylara noted. She's learning that the most important factors in any equation are often the ones that cannot be measured. Admiral Kresh filled the final display, his hive mind consciousness suddenly cut off from his collective. For the first time in his existence, he stood alone with his thoughts, forced to make decisions without the input of billions of other minds. The isolation was driving him to the edge of madness, as he realized how dependent his entire civilization had become on groupthink. The Admiral believes in wisdom through consensus, Mylara explained. He's discovering that true leadership sometimes requires standing alone against the crowd. Sarah watched her fellow candidates struggling with their trials, each forced to confront the fundamental assumptions that shaped their worldview. But she still didn't understand why she was being shown these alternate timelines, these different versions of herself and others. What does this have to do with the ultimate test? She asked. Everything, Mylara replied simply. The Academy doesn't teach tactics or strategy. Every species in the galaxy has warriors who can plan battles and command fleets. What the galaxy lacks are leaders who understand the true weight of command. The displays faded, leaving Sarah alone with Mylara in the simulated bridge of the Defiance. But now, the familiar surroundings felt different, charged with possibilities and paths not taken. Tell me, Commander, Mylara said, her ancient eyes fixed on Sarah's face. If you could go back to that moment in the Kepler sector, knowing what you know now about the consequences, would you make the same choice? Sarah considered the question carefully. She thought about the 47 crew members who died in pirate custody, the civilians who lived because of her surrender, and all the people who died later because pirates learned to expect human mercy. The weight of all those lives pressed down on her like a physical force. I don't know, she admitted finally. Good, Mylara said. And for the first time, she smiled. That uncertainty is the beginning of wisdom. Your fellow candidates each believe they know the right answer, the optimal solution, the perfect strategy. They're all wrong because they're asking the wrong question. What question should they be asking? Not what choice is right or wrong, Mylara replied, but what price they're willing to pay for the choices they make, and whether they're strong enough to live with the consequences. The bridge began to fade around them, the familiar details dissolving into shadow and possibility. Sarah felt herself being drawn deeper into whatever lay at the heart of the Academy's test. The real test begins now, Mylara said, as the last of the bridge disappeared. Your fellow candidates are learning that their certainties are illusions. You've already taken the first step by admitting uncertainty. Now you must discover what lies beyond doubt. Sarah found herself standing in darkness, but it wasn't empty. The shadows around her moved with purpose, reshaping themselves into new scenarios, new possibilities, new choices that would test not just her tactical judgment, but the very foundation of her character. The ultimate test continued, and Sarah was beginning to understand that graduation from the Academy would require more than military competence. It would demand a kind of wisdom that could only be forged in the fires of impossible decisions and unacceptable compromises. Behind her, she could hear the distant sounds of her fellow candidates struggling with their own trials, each discovering that the path to true leadership required abandoning the comfortable certainties they had carried into the academy. The Dragon Lady's test was stripping away everything they thought they knew about command, leaving only the raw essence of who they truly were. And in that essence, some would find strength. Others would find only breaking points. The darkness around Sarah coalesced into a new reality. She stood in the command center of a space station overlooking a dying star. The massive red giant pulsed ominously beyond the viewport, its surface roiling with barely contained energies. Countdown displays showed 18 hours until stellar collapse would destroy everything in the system. Below on the star's remaining planet, 2 billion refugees waited for evacuation. Sarah's fleet could carry perhaps half that number. The mathematics were brutal and simple: save some or lose all. This scenario has no optimal solution, she said aloud, recognizing the Academy's test for what it was. Doesn't it? Director Mylara materialized beside the command console, but now she appeared younger, her scales bright with health, her eyes holding the fire of someone still learning, rather than someone who had learned everything. Perhaps you're looking at the problem incorrectly. Sarah studied the tactical displays. Her available ships, their cargo capacities, the time constraints, the resources needed for evacuation. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. Catastrophic loss of life was inevitable. In 16 hours, my fellow candidates will make their decisions, Mylara said conversationally. Would you like to see how they approach this scenario? The displays shifted to show Prince Zephyron standing in an identical command center. His royal bearing had been stripped away by hours of trials, leaving him looking exhausted and uncertain. He stared at the same impossible numbers with growing desperation. My royal prerogative grants me the authority to conscript additional vessels, he declared, but his voice lacked conviction. I order all civilian ships in the sector to assist with evacuation. There are no other ships, his adjutant reported quietly. The royal fleet is all we have. Zephyron's bioluminescent patterns flickered with panic as he confronted a situation where authority meant nothing. His noble blood couldn't conjure ships from empty space or stretch cargo holds beyond their limits. For perhaps the first time in his life, his royal commands were powerless against physical reality. Another display revealed General Vorthok approaching the crisis with mechanical precision. His cybernetic implants worked overtime, calculating optimization algorithms at superhuman speed. He divided the refugees into categories based on age, health, genetic potential, and projected societal contribution. Priority evacuation for subjects aged 18 to 35 with advanced technical training, he announced. Secondary priority for breeding-age females with optimal genetic markers. Tertiary priority for children with exceptional intelligence quotients. His calculations were perfectly logical, designed to maximize the survival of the most viable population segments. But Sarah noticed that his optical sensors avoided displaying the faces of those he was condemning to death. The general's mechanical enhancements allowed him to make the necessary choices, but they couldn't eliminate the weight of those decisions. Lady Seraphina's trial played out on a third screen. Her crystalline form had lost much of its luster, fractures spreading across her surface as she struggled to process variables that defied mathematical analysis. She had attempted to create perfect distribution algorithms, but kept encountering factors that couldn't be quantified. The elderly physicist who trained our best engineers but has only months to live naturally, she muttered, her harmonic voice discordant with stress. The infant, with unknown potential, but greatest life expectancy. The artist whose work inspires millions but contributes nothing measurable to survival. How do I calculate the value of hope against the certainty of genetic diversity? Her perfect mathematical worldview was crumbling as she realized that the most important human qualities couldn't be reduced to numbers. Every optimization she attempted felt like a violation of something fundamental that her equations couldn't capture. Admiral Kresh faced perhaps the cruelest test of all. His trial had reconnected him to the Hive Confederation's collective consciousness. But only partially. He could hear the voices of his billions of people, but they were debating the evacuation scenario with perfect democratic equality. Every opinion carried equal weight. Every voice demanded to be heard. The swarm has no consensus, he reported in bewilderment. 17 billion individual perspectives on the optimal solution. The collective intelligence that has guided us for millennia has become paralyzed by infinite options. Sarah watched him struggle with the realization that democracy and wisdom were not synonymous. The hive's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness when faced with a decision that required leadership rather than consensus. Each of them represents a different failure mode, Mylara observed as the displays faded. The prince discovers that authority without competence is meaningless. The general learns that logic without humanity becomes monstrous. The lady finds that mathematics without soul is incomplete. The admiral realizes that collective wisdom requires individual courage to act. And what am I supposed to learn? Sarah asked. That remains to be seen, Mylara replied. You've progressed farther than most candidates manage. You've acknowledged uncertainty, accepted the weight of consequences, and resisted the urge to find simple solutions to complex problems. But the final test remains. The command center around them began to shift and change. The dying star outside grew brighter, more urgent. The countdown displays accelerated, showing hours compressed into minutes. Sarah felt the pressure of imminent catastrophe pressing down on her like a physical weight. Make your choice, Commander, Mylara said quietly. 2 billion lives hang in the balance. Your fleet can save 1 billion at most. What do? Sarah studied the displays one more time, looking for options she might have missed. But the mathematics remained unchanged. Impossible choices demanded impossible prices. She closed her eyes and made her decision. I evacuate as many as possible, starting with children and essential personnel, she said. But I don't leave the rest to die alone. I stay with my ship, broadcasting messages of hope and coordination until the end. If 1 billion people must die, they deserve to know that someone witnessed their courage. That saves no additional lives, Mylara pointed out. No, Sarah agreed. But it honors them. Sometimes bearing witness is the only gift we can offer. The displays faded completely, leaving them in a space that felt infinite and empty. Sarah waited for judgment, for explanation, for something that would tell her whether she had passed or failed the ultimate test. Your fellow candidates made different choices, Mylara said eventually. Prince Zephyron attempted to sacrifice himself dramatically, believing that noble gesture would somehow conjure miracle solutions. General Vorthak completed his optimization algorithms and saved exactly the number his calculations suggested, then deactivated his emotion circuits to avoid processing guilt. Lady Seraphina suffered complete system breakdown when forced to choose between equally valid mathematical models. Admiral Kresh called for a vote among the refugees themselves, abdicating the responsibility of command. Did any of them pass? Sarah asked. Pass? Fail? Mylara's laugh held no humor. The Academy doesn't measure success that way. We measure understanding. Do you comprehend what you've experienced here? Sarah thought about everything she had witnessed. The alternate timelines, the impossible scenarios, the weight of decisions that had no right answers. A pattern began to emerge, a truth that went beyond tactics and strategy. Leadership isn't about making the right choices, she said slowly. It's about being willing to make choices at all, knowing that any decision will cause suffering, and accepting responsibility for that suffering. Continue, Mylara prompted. The other candidates each tried to find systems that would make the hard choices for them. Royal authority, mechanical calculation, mathematical optimization, collective consensus. They wanted something external to bear the weight of command. And you? I learned that the weight can't be shared or delegated or systematized away. A leader has to carry it personally, completely, forever. That's the price of the authority to decide who lives and who dies. Mylara nodded slowly, her ancient eyes holding depths that Sarah was only beginning to understand. The Academy exists to identify those rare individuals who can bear such weight without being broken by it, who can make impossible choices without losing their humanity, who can accept the full consequences of command without becoming monsters. The empty space around them began to brighten, revealing the Academy's true nature. It wasn't a school in any conventional sense, but rather a forge designed to test the fundamental character of potential leaders. The trials weren't designed to teach lessons but to reveal truths that already existed within each candidate. Most who come here believe they seek military training, Mylara continued. They want to learn tactics, strategies, technologies that will make them more effective commanders. But effectiveness without wisdom is the path to tyranny. The galaxy has countless effective tyrants. What it lacks are wise leaders. What happens to the others? Sarah asked, thinking of her fellow candidates struggling with their trials. Prince Zephyron will return to his throne with a deeper understanding of what royal authority truly costs. He may become a better ruler for having learned humility, or he may retreat into comfortable delusions about noble sacrifice. General Vorthak will upgrade his emotional processing systems, trying to engineer compassion into his cybernetic matrix. Lady Seraphina will spend years developing new mathematical frameworks that account for unmeasurable variables. Admiral Kresh will propose reforms to the Hive Confederation's decision-making processes. And they'll all miss the point, Sarah realized. Perhaps. Or perhaps they'll grow into wisdom through different paths. The Academy's lessons continue long after candidates leave these chambers. Some achieve understanding immediately. Others take decades. And a few never learn at all. How many have graduated? Including you? 47 in the Academy's entire history. Sarah felt the weight of that number. 47 individuals deemed worthy of the Academy's deepest teachings in 10,000 years. The responsibility was staggering. What am I supposed to do with this knowledge? She asked. What you've always done, Mylara replied. Command, lead, make impossible choices. But now you'll do so with full understanding of what leadership truly costs. The Academy's chambers began to fade around them, reality reasserting itself as the ultimate test concluded. Sarah found herself standing once again in the original testing chamber. But she was alone except for Director Mylara. The other candidates were nowhere to be seen. They've been returned to their respective fleets, Mylara explained. Each received appropriate commendations for their performance, though none achieved full graduation status. They'll continue their careers with new perspectives on command, which serves the galaxy's interests even if they never master the Academy's deepest lessons. And me? You have a choice to make, Commander Chen. You can return to human space with the rank of Admiral and the Academy's endorsement. Your career will advance rapidly, your opinions will carry enormous weight, and you'll find yourself in positions of ever greater authority. That doesn't sound like a choice. It sounds like exactly what I want. The alternative is to remain here as my successor, Mylara said quietly. The Academy requires a director, someone who understands the true nature of leadership well enough to test others. I've served for 800 years. The burden grows heavy, and I find myself longing for rest. Sarah stared at the ancient being who had shaped galactic politics through careful selection and training of leaders. The idea of taking on such responsibility was both terrifying and compelling. How long would I serve? Until you find someone worthy to replace you. Perhaps centuries, perhaps millennia. Time moves differently here, and the Academy's work is measured in eons rather than decades. What about my own ambitions? My career? My life? Gone, Mylara said simply. The Academy demands everything from those who serve it, but in return, you shape the course of galactic civilization by identifying and forging the leaders who will guide countless species toward wisdom rather than destruction. Sarah considered the choice before her. Return to a life of increasing authority and responsibility, or accept the ultimate responsibility of testing and training future leaders. Both paths served the greater good, but in vastly different ways. I need time to decide, she said. Of course, Mylara agreed. But understand that this opportunity will not come again. The Academy chooses its directors carefully, and few prove worthy of the selection. As they spoke, the testing chamber's walls began to shift once more, revealing a corridor that led back toward the Academy's entrance. Sarah could see sunlight in the distance, the promise of return to normal space and normal responsibilities, but she could also see deeper passages leading into the Academy's heart, chambers where future candidates would face their own ultimate tests. Spaces where the galaxy's next generation of wise leaders would be forged through trial and revelation. Director Mylara gestured toward the Academy's depths with an expression that might have been mockery or might have been challenge. The Dragon Lady had tested countless candidates over 8 centuries, watching most fail to comprehend the true nature of leadership. Now she stood ready to transfer that burden to someone who had proven capable of bearing it. Sarah stood at the crossroads of her life, understanding fully for the first time what it meant to make choices that would echo across centuries. Whatever she decided would shape not only her own destiny but the destiny of countless beings who would face the Academy's trials in years to come. The ultimate test was complete, but the greatest choice still lay ahead. And in that choice, Sarah would discover whether she had truly learned the Academy's deepest lesson. That true leadership meant accepting burdens that no one else could bear, making sacrifices that no one else could understand, and carrying forward the endless work of forging wisdom from the raw material of ambition and authority. The Dragon Lady waited patiently for her answer, just as the Academy itself waited for the next chapter in its 10,000-year mission to identify and train the leaders who would guide galactic civilization toward something greater than mere survival. The gesture toward the Academy's depths remained, neither mocking nor challenging, but simply offering. The choice, as always, was Sarah's alone to make.